Hey there guys, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing the GenMachine REN4000 that I recently got with the REN5000. Now the REN4000 does have the Ryzen 7 4700U. That is a Zen 2 based 8-core processor with no SMT, and that is going up against the Ryzen 3 5300U in the REN5000, and that is a 4-core 8-thread Zen 2 processor. Both of these systems I picked up from AliExpress. I got the REN5000 with the Ryzen 3 5300U for $133, and I got the REN4000 with the Ryzen 7 4700U for $160. Both of these were bare bones units, and although I did configure the version with the Ryzen 7 4700U with more RAM, in the testing that we're going to be doing today, that is not going to make any difference whatsoever. They're both running at the exact same speed, and RAM capacity is just not going to matter for any of this. But let's jump into some testing. So on the topic of CPU performance, because that is one of the biggest differences that we're looking at here, and it's really just core configurations. Since we are looking at the same architecture, both are Zen 2, the Ryzen 7 4700U ends up giving the highest in terms of multi-core performance, but the difference was not that different between the two, where the 5300U ended up giving me a multi-core score of 5432, the 4700U ended up scoring 6310. So while this does mean that the Ryzen 7 4700U does have the best overall multi-core performance, I wouldn't really use that as a deciding factor here. And well, when we take a look at the single core performance, these two systems are performing pretty much in line with where you would expect any Zen 2 based systems to fall in line in. The real differences here are just going to come down to clock speed, and that really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So the only other real difference comes down to the iGPU, and that is where we're looking at a Radeon Vega 6 versus a Radeon Vega 8. So starting off, the comparison is always Counter-Strike 2, the most popular game on Steam, and this is running at the lowest graphics settings, but we are not using FSR at all. And as you can see between both systems here, the Ryzen 7 4700U is coming in with the lead in both the FPS average and the 1% lows. We're seeing a 7.5% increase in the FPS average and an even better 12.1% increase in the 1% lows. So it's not a substantial lead, but considering the FPS numbers that we're at here, small improvements can get a noticeably better result just in terms of playability. I mean, we are far closer to a 60 FPS average with the 4700U than with the 5300U. But of course, this is the difference between a Vega 6 and a Vega 8 graphics. And I did follow this up with a usual staple of this channel, being Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. This is running with the low graphics preset, and neither system is able to give you a 60 FPS average, but of course the 4700U does end up coming out in the lead again. We do see a relatively nice 18% increase in the FPS average here, but with a far less impressive 8.8% increase in the 1% lows. Still, that does put the 4700U far closer to a 60 FPS average, and in a title like this where in the late game things can get pretty heavy, I think you're going to like the improvement here. One of the more surprising results to me was actually Rainbow Six Siege X, where at 1080p with the lowest in-game graphics settings and using FSR at the quality preset, and this is FSR 2.0, the performance was practically identical between these two systems. The 1% lows are pretty much identical, with the FPS average having a 10% difference, but that 10% difference is just completely negated by those 1% lows. So when you play the game, you're realistically not going to feel any kind of difference between the two, and neither one is providing a great experience here. You would really have to use FSR at the performance preset to try to get anything better than this. One of the things that I do like about these mini PCs though is the fact that that they can serve as essentially HD versions of older consoles. So you're able to play Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 games at higher resolutions and higher graphical settings than people that played these games really did back in the day on a console, and a lot of times even on PC. So BioShock Infinite here running at the high graphics settings at 1080p on both of these systems is getting a pretty great result, and in both scenarios it is beating out what the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were doing. Interestingly enough though, in Grid 2 both of these chips produce the exact same result at the 1080p high graphics settings. So both systems were giving a more than comfortably above 60 FPS average, with the only real difference being in 1% lows, and really from run to run there could be some pretty major variance here. I'm not really sure what ends up happening in the benchmark that will just occasionally end up causing a lag spike, but this doesn't always occur, but across multiple runs it can just randomly happen, and it's across pretty much all systems that I've ever tested. But in the runs where that lag spike does not happen, we pretty much get the exact same result. And of course, to represent something really old, we have this DirectX 9 game, Resident Evil 5, running with the high graphics settings, and we are using anti-aliasing with 2x. And here both systems give a pretty great result, though only the 4700U manages to get an above 60 FPS average. Still, you are likely to find this to be a very playable experience, and as I mentioned before, you are going to have a better time than people that play this on console. So there you have it. The difference between the 5300U and the 4700U are pretty minuscule for the most part. Using either one of these systems day to day, you're realistically not going to notice a difference. CPU wise, they are practically identical. There is a difference in terms of multi-core performance, but you're not realistically going to feel that in any workload that you would do on either one of these systems. The real difference just comes down to the iGPU, and well, that's where the 4700U does end up taking the lead. Because it does have the Vega 8 graphics, it is going to come up ahead of the 5300U that has only the Vega 6 graphics. And while the difference in some titles is going to be pretty minuscule, more around 10 or sometimes even less than 10% difference, in other titles we could be seeing as much as a 15 to 20% difference. And really at the frame rates that we're getting in some titles, that could be the difference between you being able to play the game comfortably or not. And well, considering the fact that the price difference that we're talking about here at any given time could be anywhere between $20 to $30, even as high as $40, I think it's worthwhile. But really, if you care about iGPU performance, with either one of these, once they're configured with RAM, you're within the price range of far better systems anyway. So I really don't think that either one of these is a great value, but it is a pretty tough sell to go with the 5300U, especially considering that right now it's not on sale like how it was when I bought it. At least when I got it, if you just want a bare bones minimum system, as in you're only going to put something like 8 gigabytes of RAM or a single stick of 16 and maybe upgrade later down the line, and you just want a very basic system that isn't going to be running on only 4 cores and you want that hyper threading, well, it's not a terrible deal when it's on sale at less than $140. But as it is right now, I don't think that either one of these systems is really all that great of a value. But I'll link some better systems down below. I'll catch you guys in the next one.